Good afternoon. Welcome to the fifth episode of the Syeem Sector Streams webinars. Today we're talking about planning for recovery and a green economy. So today's agenda, I'll take you quickly through asking questions, introduce today's panel. We've got two short updates for you, one on our planning for recovery working group and one on a general approach to green recovery. And then we'll have a panel discussion and hopefully some questions from you as participants. So asking questions, please use the functionality on the screen, the little Q&A button at the bottom. My colleague Amber is working in the background. She'll be reviewing questions and posing them to the panel. Please feel free to use the chat amongst yourselves. We won't be monitoring that, but if you wanted to make any comments in there and have a discussion, please do feel free to use that. So today's panel, we've got Max Wade, our president, and from ACOM, who is not quite online yet. Chris Gerard, our governing board member and chair of our Planning for Recovery Working Group, and also Anglian Water. Sally Haynes, our chief exec, myself, Jason Reeves, head of policy and comms, and helping us today in the background, Amber Connett, our policy and communications officer. Presentations. Chris, would you like to give us an overview of the Planning for Recovery Working Group, please?
Certainly, thanks, Jason. So I'm Chris Gerard. I'm the Catchment and Biodiversity Manager at Anglian Water. I've been governing board member for about 18 months now, Syeem member for as long as I can remember, really. And I was asked to chair a group of people supporting the board and the secretariat on how it's handling the COVID-19 situation. So we've had about 4 meetings now. Nimble meetings. The team acts as a sounding board to hear what the Secretariat is doing to provide support and challenge on its work. It's got a brief terms of reference, which broadly split into 2 areas. So one is internally focused at Syeem itself. So how is Syeem as an organisation coping and dealing with the challenges that the organisation has during the COVID-19 crisis. And the other one is an external focused view to support the membership. So looking at what assistance is available both from Syeem and elsewhere to support members, but then broadly to identify the strategic opportunities and threats to the role of the profession going forward to make sure that as we get past the pandemic, the sector is fit and even better placed to deal with the biodiversity and other environmental challenges that we face. The membership is a small one, so there's 8 people on the group, and they have been specially selected to cover the entire geographic area of Syeem's interest and the different sectors that the organisation covers as well. So hopefully in that way all members' interests are being served by the group that are sitting on the panel. We meet every couple of weeks just for an hour and a half, so it's a very quick meeting. It's intended to be very nimble, and as I said, it's really there just to hear from the Secretariat on what has happened over the preceding 2 weeks, to look at a set of data, to oversee how things are going for the organisation, and to, as I say, scrutinise, challenge, endorse and support plans that the Syeem is undertaking. I guess at the moment the way the meetings work is to firstly look at a set of key performance data that the Secretariat provides, so looking at membership, looking at finance, looking at the professional development programme, for example, and then to do a bit of a deeper dive on different areas of activity. So that could be the work that the Secretariat is doing on membership, on the finances of the organisation, and most recently looking at the green recovery that Syeem wants to play a part on over the coming months. So it's hopefully providing a lot of value both to the board and to the Secretariat. We've got meetings scheduled right the way through the year, but we'll step down just as soon as the board and the Secretariat thinks that the group has served its purpose. So I think that's probably a good overview of what the group is doing, Jason, so I'll hand back to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome, Max. So just a quick overview of green recovery. So just a general, where are we now, and then a bit about what Syeem is up to. So we've heard a lot recently about building back better, a green recovery. So we start to come out of COVID-19, moving to a green economy. We've seen NGOs, charities, businesses, politicians. We've had an early day motion from Caroline Lucas. We've had UK cabinet ministers, including Dominic Raab and Alok Sharma. We've had the European Union, all coming out to support a green recovery. We've also had public opinion polls saying that they support a green recovery. We've had the Committee on Climate Change say that that reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate change should be integral to any recovery package, and even suggesting that low oil prices at the moment should be used to raise carbon taxes. We've had the chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, Sir John Armitt, say that he wants net zero to be built into the recovery process for infrastructure, specifically to help achieve net zero and to address regional inequalities, such as bringing forward energy efficiency retrofitting, expanding contracts to grow renewables faster, and the creation of a new national infrastructure bank. Most will look at the issues and see that climate action and economic returns probably mean that the emphasis is on infrastructure and technology, and that's great. And there's more that we can do to progress these things, including renewable energy generation, storage, grid modernization, energy and heating efficiency and retrofitting, investing in training and reskilling to help people move to green jobs, and then supporting things like active transport, walking and cycling. On the flip side of this, we need to address polluting and high energy industries to improve their own performances and not just support business as usual. This means we can't just give bailouts without conditions, for example. There needs to be some kind of change in the way that they operate. So it's obvious that we need to link recovery to climate action, and more widely you could also include the Sustainable Development Goals, but we need to ensure that recovery is not just on carbon emissions. We need to recognise the importance of biodiversity and its complexities, and use the economic recovery packages to help restore nature as well. So we all know the many, many benefits of healthy functioning ecosystems, and I won't go into any of those today. We know that they cover a whole range of things, yeah, that's great. So what I will say though is that, as we've noted before through our Action 2030 working group, that the climate emergency and the biodiversity crisis are inextricably linked, and we have to address them together in tandem. We can't address one without the other. So moving on to a green recovery and what Syeem would like to see. So we're currently finalising our position, and they'll be using that to engage with partners and governments. Some of the things that we're looking at are probably the need for emphasis on natural capital accounting and ensuring that nature's value is included in any recovery packages in that way. There needs to be investment in natural capital, including supporting climate and wildlife friendly agriculture and restoring carbon-rich habitats. One way to do this would be to directly invest in jobs that advise farmers and land managers, and in jobs that directly work on habitat restoration and creation. Investing in jobs directly gets people back to work and stimulates the economy. In providing financial support to businesses, there could be a mandatory requirement to report on their natural capital impacts. This would enable them to help them and governments see what impacts they are having on their businesses and what those investments are having. And Syeem would help to, or would be in a position to help develop those reporting mechanisms. We also need governments to be aware of unintended consequences on the natural environment. If there is a rush to get the economy moving again quickly without full consideration, we would suggest that governments need to undertake impact assessments on all of their investments. And this ensures then that we're not taken off course, and that governments themselves can actually deliver on their own ambitions to enhance and restore the natural environment now and for future generations. So regarding infrastructure stimulus, governments also need to take into account proposals from the forthcoming post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, the COP15 meeting was supposed to be taking place this year, has been postponed, probably take place next year sometime. The zero draft proposal for that currently includes ambitions for increased percentages of land and sea to be set aside for nature, that would need to be included in conjunction with any national infrastructure and development plans. So a few things that Syeem is doing now. So we're of course heavily involved in the ongoing development of biodiversity net gain. That links directly to development and helping that to get moving again, at the same time increasing biodiversity. And then linked to this, we're in the process of starting a new working group on environmental net gain. And out of interest, if you are interested in being involved in this group, you have until tomorrow to submit your interest. We're just about to publish a new briefing paper on nature-based solutions that links directly into how investments could be made that work for nature. So keep your eye out for that. The September edition of our In Practice magazine will be on the theme of climate action and green recovery, obviously with an emphasis on biodiversity as well. The deadline for that has been extended to the 26th of June if you're interested in submitting to that as well. Our autumn conference as well this year, currently planned as a physical event for later in the year in Bristol in December, will be on the theme of time to change, putting the environment at the heart of social and economic well-being. We'll also cover green economy, green recovery. So yeah, so that's an overview of where we are and what Syeem is up to. What we really like now, and we welcome, is your thoughts, comments and questions. What does a green recovery look like for you? What should it include? How should it be delivered? And also potentially if you're happy to share what you and your organizations are doing differently to help with the green recovery. So if I go over to Amber, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Jason. We've got a couple in the private Q&A. The first one is for you, Jason. It's who is Syeem engaging with on a green recovery?
So as I said, we're just finalising our position. We've already been talking to some of the other professional bodies, mainly through the Environmental Policy Forum. So we'll obviously be working with them. Once we've got our position finalised, hopefully this week, we'll be moving on to engaging with governments, and that actually starts next week. So yeah, things are moving on.
Thank you. There's a question here for Max. There's been concern around not lowering standards of survey and data collection this survey season. How is Syeem addressing the issue?
Well, I think first off, Amber, we've recognised that there could be an issue and understand the concerns associated with this. And currently, our plan is to undertake an ongoing review, really, of the new guidance that that Syeem has provided in relation to surveys and the restrictions that we have in terms of the pandemic. We will definitely be reviewing this in September, when hopefully things may have settled down, and in which case we'll be able to rescind it. So I think we recognise there's an issue, and we'll be able to react accordingly as time goes by.
Thank you, Max. We've got a question probably for Sally, more to do with economic recovery. What is Syeem doing to support members in the economic recovery process? What is happening to membership fees? Oh, Sally, you're on mute.
We recognise it's a really challenging time for a lot of our members, and we are empathetic to that, and are keen to support members, particularly those on low income. And we do have on our website details of our low income support. In terms of membership fees, the governing board have decided that this year not to implement a planned increase in membership fees. So membership fees are staying frozen. All members should have received an email from the membership team, I think it was early this month, which explained about some options. So we encourage members who feel that they would benefit from spreading the payment of the membership fee to go down the direct debit option, and to complete a direct debit mandate form. The earlier you can do that, the better the chance that we get that process before the membership renewal fees due. But that will enable you to spread the payment over the year. We are also able to offer members the option of deferral of payment. So you can defer the payment of the membership subscription for up to 12 months. It means the membership fee is still owed and will still need to be paid, but you can just knock back that payment for part of all of a year. And if you are otherwise having difficulties, we would encourage you to talk to the membership team and get in contact, and they will talk through your options with you. If you get your membership subscription paid by your employer, then employers who pay for 10 or more members can talk to us about business invoicing and making the administration of that more straightforward. And finally, if you can afford to pay, we would urge you to do so promptly. We ourselves are not a wealthy institution, and our ability to support members who need our help and support is very much directed to the support we get from the members who are able to pay on time or even before time if possible. So, but I think the key message is talk to us. If you've got a problem with paying your membership subscriptions, please do talk to us.
Thank you, Sally. We've had a question come in, which I think is for Jason. So the support for green recovery from a wide variety of individuals and organisations is to be welcomed. However, as correctly pointed out, the emphasis of government and business is to get unemployment rate down and get people back into jobs as quickly as possible. This is a priority that proponents of a green recovery are up against. So what is Syeem intending to do to specifically address this issue, as opposed to just focusing on developing ideas for a green recovery?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important point that a lot of the emphasis will be on stimulating jobs and getting people back into work as quickly as possible. Our role is to go and talk to governments and emphasize the importance of doing this in a slightly different way, not just business as usual. That there is a value in doing this in a way that, yes, all of this stuff that's what you call green technology and infrastructure, an emphasis on that, but integrating it with things like nature-based solutions. I mentioned in the little talk about directly employing people to actually build back habitats, restore and enhance habitats, or create habitats. That is actually employment. You can pay people to do that. And there's added benefits to that afterwards. So our job is really to convince governments that there is a role for biodiversity and nature in that, and making them see that. So we just have to make that engagement. We have to make those arguments, and we have to do it and fairly quickly, I think, as well.
Thanks, Jason. We've had another one come in, which I think is for Jason also, but if anyone wants to jump in. How likely do you think green transport will be encouraged and invested in, given already people are being advised to avoid public transport in the coming months? Is this instead just a nice idea, but unlikely to materialise?
I think it's really difficult. The combination of coronavirus and not using public transport, encouraging people to use their cars, we understand that. If people live close enough to where it is they need to get to, whether that's work, the shops, visiting family and friends, if they can walk or cycle, that's great. We've seen things already starting to change in the cities, even in my local area, my local borough. They've done temporary changes to allow more cycling and pedestrian areas. We need to make the argument to say that we need to keep those things. There's huge benefits in their health and well-being. So it is difficult in the very short term advice to use your personal cars, but there's definitely benefits we can argue for in the long term that are being put in place at the moment as temporary measures that we can hopefully argue to make permanent. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that one as well.
Well, only to say, sorry, just only to say that I think one of the key things is trying to influence government strategy to invest in green public transport. It is a cost now and in the short term, but the longer term benefits in terms of a green recovery are immense. So it needs to be some strategic leadership from governments in terms of investing in green transport, green public transport.
Chris, did you want to come in as well, or?
I was just going to make the point that Sally just made.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we have a question here for, I suppose, both Chris and Max, but we'll come to Chris first. Has your own organisation started to do anything differently in planning for recovery and to support a green recovery?
Yeah, well, so at Anglian Water, we've obviously got a lot of staff, and they have the operational people out on our sites and dealing with our customers have worked under very tight operating procedures for the last few months, and that is starting to be a little bit relaxed. So work that we had locked down is now starting to reappear. For the likes of me, who are based in the core offices, it's pretty clear that life is not going to go back to how it used to be for us ever, essentially. The business has looked at productivity and is coming to the conclusion that we're very capable of doing everything that we need to do from our working at home situation. And so what the business is really keen to do, I think, is to try and get the benefits of both home working as well as managing the disbenefits. So a lot of us are now not commuting to work, not driving to work anymore. And so there are benefits there, but there's also the disbenefits of being alone a lot as well. So that does need to be managed. But we're looking to therefore repurpose our offices into much more creative collaboration spaces rather than just desks for people to go and sit at during the day, if they can equally work at home. So a much more flexible working environment going forward, I expect. We've also been trialing new technologies for the live video casting of sites. So whether it's for ecological reasons or for operational reasons, rather than people having to go to a site to look at a problem or an issue, we have fewer people going out to site, but broadcasting live information so people can attend a meeting at home, and that's proving to be really successful as well. So that cuts down driving too, which is an additional benefit there. And in the future, that sort of technology will become augmented reality as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that going forward. So certainly for us, it's not going to be the same again. In terms of the green recovery, I think we're seeing as a great opportunity to amplify the messages that we've already been given. Climate change is a massive driver for Anglian Water as a business. We're hugely at threat from climate change, and the environment in our region is at threat from climate change. So we're joining voices with others to just try and make sure that message is out there as loud as possible. So my chief executive, Peter Simpson, has now become a co-chair of the Corporate Leaders Group, which is a group convened by Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, making the call for a zero carbon economy. The water industry has now set itself a target of net zero for 2030. You can read a blog by Peter Simpson on the Green Alliance website, and a video he posted. You can probably find that on LinkedIn, on the Build Back Better campaign that the We Mean Business Coalition has been putting out there. So very much a climate change focus, because that's such an existential threat to us as a company. But behind that come a whole suite of other things that point to the imperative about protecting the environment as well, whether that's water efficiency in the home, per capita consumption, or as Jason touched on, nature-based solutions that we as a water company should be able to be harnessing in order to address our core operational challenges, but to do that in a way that enhances biodiversity really well as well. Alongside that, we're calling for biodiversity net gain to be mandatory too. So the whole set of messages there that we've already had, but this is a fantastic opportunity just to make it louder, to talk to government even better, and to encourage other businesses to get on board with those messages, and to work with the NGO sector and other sectors, because the more we can talk to government alongside environmental NGOs, for example, the more likely we'll have traction with government.
Brilliant, thank you. Max, did you want to add anything about what your organisation is doing about recovery?
Yes, thanks, Amber. Very similar in the number to Chris and what you were just describing for Anglian Water, Chris. Thinking about some new ways of working, and we also will be continuing to do quite a lot more working from home is certainly the direction we appear to be going in. I think we need to also sort of bear in mind that we need to have a evidence-based approach, if you like, in terms of thinking about energy balance. Certainly my energy bill has shot up over the last couple of months or so, and we need to ensure that our sort of new offices, if you like, are energy efficient, but also taking into account the other part of the balance in terms of an increased workforce working from home. So there are it raises questions that we need to ensure that we are approaching this in a balanced way, and rather than just taking what could for large organisations be an easy way of saving money, which is a slightly cynical approach. I think as well, in terms of our health and well-being, there needs to be investment in appropriate support, not just in terms of computer IT, etc. The chair you're sitting on, the actual environment that you're working in. For a couple of months or so, it may be okay to sort of put up with that. It's been an emergency, and everybody obviously has wanted to respond. But is that sustainable on into the future? And we'll need to have these dialogues to make sure that we're looking after our teams appropriately, be they large or small. But certainly, meetings, we will continue to be having those more on a remote type basis. Our travel, we're being much more efficient in terms of resourcing our field work, for example. We've learned quite a lot by being forced to try to resource more locally, and they're all really good things that we need to carry on into the future. We should also remember that we have the opportunity as ecologists and environmental managers to influence our clients. They will also be listening to and being influenced by the intention to have a green recovery, and we can engage with them and help them to realise that ambition from their own point of view, rather than risking them slipping back into sort of pre-COVID ways in terms of dealing with biodiversity and environmental issues. And that groundswell of the need for a green recovery should give us confidence in our advice in terms of work that we're engaging with now and in the near future. Confidence that we understand the importance of biodiversity in relation to a whole range of developments, factors, and so on. So let's make sure that we build on that. Certainly, we've been talking about that in our own teams within AECOM. So I think they're probably some of the sort of main thoughts, Amber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. So we have a question for Sally in regards to guidance in lockdown. What happens if there's a second spike in cases in, say, just England later in the year and other countries have eased lockdowns? What will Syeem advise RE guidance?
So this probably relates to our guidance on alternative approaches to ecological assessment, and potentially also the guidance in relation to sites and site management. Our advice and our guidance has really got to be quite agile in terms of responding to the circumstances, and if they change, then our advice and guidance will change. Certainly, there's already quite a bit of divergence on a country basis, and our advice and guidance is reflecting that. That would necessarily have to continue. In England specifically, the government is talking about having more localized lockdowns. So we would need to respond to that in terms of whether you are in a either operating out of a lockdown area, or your work, your sites that you're going to are in a lockdown area. Then there'd have to be advice in relation to that, as opposed to if you were not in a lockdown area. But essentially, it's got to be agile guidance pertinent to the situation as it continues to unfold. And as Max said earlier in this webinar, it's also got a limited lifespan. It's a temporary guidance for a temporary situation, and there will come a time where we will need to rescind it and hopefully revert to previous guidance, or indeed new guidance. But yeah, I think the key message is that we will be looking to keep our advice and our guidance agile.
Thank you, Sally. So we've got a couple more questions left. Another one for Sally. How will the CIEEM Autumn Conference include the theme of green recovery?
Well, as Jason mentioned earlier, our conference theme is on time to change, putting the environment at the heart of social and economic recovery. So we, as part of that, will be looking at green recovery. We want to look at and understand the kind of political, the social and economic drivers for green recovery, and the potential actions and the benefits of those actions to address the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. We'll be exploring more around nature-based approaches and how they can inform our work as practitioners. We'll want to be exploring the opportunities to develop our own professional practice through new tools and techniques and policy instruments that will enable us to lead practical action for a green recovery, and also reflecting on that, how that might impact on our own personal development or our team development and our career development. So there's currently a call for papers out on that for that conference. So we'll be very much looking forward to welcoming some really thought-provoking and innovative papers. We'll be delighted to hear from you. I think the closing date is towards the end of July.
Thank you, Sally. So we're down to the last question now. It's a slightly different topic, but I think this one's for Sally, and then Jason, if you'd like to come in as well. What is Syeem's response to the current focus on diversity and inclusion issues?
That's a very good question. I think all of us have been saddened by events over the past few weeks, but it has shone a spotlight on a systemic issue within society that we really do need to address. And it's made us all think about ourselves, I suspect, but also our profession. We are a predominantly white middle-class professional body representing a white middle-class profession, and we need to look at why that is, and what action we can take to change that. We will be a stronger profession, I think, if we are able to recruit the sort of talents and skills of people from all walks of life, all aspects of our society. And we need to look to see whether there are reasons why that's not happening. And in particular, we need to hear the voices of those who aren't attracted to ecology and environmental management as a profession, or who are attracted but find it inaccessible, or when they do join the profession, find barriers along the way that aren't there from people from a different background. So we were, prior to recent events, we were already looking at something called a progression framework for diversity and inclusion for professional bodies, which is something that's been led by the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Science Council. And this is actually also a topic we'll be exploring further at the autumn conference, because putting environment at the heart of social and economic well-being is important for all of society. So we'll be having a session on this at the autumn conference. We'll be publishing a statement on our website shortly, and the governing board will be discussing it at their upcoming meeting in July. But I think most importantly, we need to hear from our members. We need to hear from our members who are affected by this or have an important message to contribute, or just interested in getting involved. We used to have a diversity working group within the institute. It petered out, but I'd like to look at that again. Again, at our autumn conference, we'll be welcoming Judy Ling Wong, who's the president of the Black Environment Network, as a guest speaker, and I'd like to use that as a bit of a stimulus to looking to see whether we can identify some an agenda to take forward. But I think we have to seize this opportunity for change, recognise things we may have done wrong in the past, whether that be unintentional, and look to try and make sure that we're not having these same conversations in 10, 20 or 30 years time. I think that's, for me, is key. I can remember 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the jobs I was in then, we were talking about these issues. We were engaging with community groups representing BAME communities about these issues, and yet nothing has changed. And I really don't want to be thinking that that's going to be the case in 10, 20 or 30 years time. So I think the important thing is that this is a watershed moment for us to look at effecting change, and I'd like to think that Syeem will play a very active part in doing that.
Thank you, Sally. Jason, did you want to add anything? Or?
I think Sally's covered everything. It's an issue that I mean, we know is there. We're very homogenous as a profession, and we have started to put things, well, we have been putting things in place. I mean, if you just look at things like in practice and the imagery on our website, we've tried to make them more inclusive, so it isn't just white people, basically. We've tried to diversify the imagery we use. That we got that as some advice some time ago, actually, so we've tried to change some of those things. So we've been doing little things, but there's definitely more that we can do, and hopefully, like Sally says, this is a watershed moment where we can really step change how we do things and how we include people.
And if members haven't done so yet, I would recommend they read Hannah Williams's article in the June issue of In Practice on this very topic. It's very, very eloquent in terms of identifying the issues.
Thank you, Sally. So we've had one last question come in.
Just before we move on, but I don't know if Chris or Max wanted to add anything on that point. It's a bit of a divergence, but I don't know if they want to add anything.
Well, I'd certainly endorse what you've both said. It is really important, and there are lots of sort of institutional issues out in the wider world which we have struggled to deal with, but what we can do is look internally into ourselves as an organisation and make sure that any conscious and unconscious biases that are essentially rolled into the way we operate as an organisation are addressed. It's simply not good enough for us to say, well, that we're not racist, we support Black Lives Matter, we're okay, but then not to take some positive action to do things. We can't be passive on this issue anymore.
Thanks, Chris. Max, did you want to add anything?
Just to underline what's been said so far, and Sally, I think, in a way, encapsulated it very well. Things that we have done or not done over the last decades clearly haven't made a difference. So, as Chris says, it's time to be doing and doing differently to make the change that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we had one last question come in for Chris. Does Chris see it as important to Anglian Water to get their 4-star EPA rating back as they do green recovery?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the EPA is the Environmental Performance Assessment, and it is an assessment that the Environment Agency makes of all water companies, the whole range of metrics that the EA uses to oversee the performance of water companies, essentially, and as a result of the assessment, you get a star rating. Actually, the way the EPA assessment is undertaken has changed, so water companies are likely to just go down a notch anyway because the standards are becoming more stretching. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's critical that the EPA rating for us and for me personally is really, really important. It's got measures in there around things like pollution events, around the impact of abstractions on the environment. So it's critical. You know, going back to what Jason's point about natural capital accounting, the EPA can be used in a sense to give at least some insights into our impacts on the natural environment. So the higher we are on that rating, the better. It's good for the environment, of course, to be higher up that list, and it's good for our reputation. And indeed, we need to be higher up that list in order to harness nature-based solutions. So if we don't have a high rating, then opportunities to do things in a different way, which are better for the environment, will not be available to us. I happen to disagree with the EA's position on that, but currently that is their view. So we do need to do that at the same time as contributing to a green recovery and encouraging others to do so across our region.
Thank you, Chris. So that's all of the questions that have come in from me.
Thank you very much, Amber. Thank you very much to the panel. So just to give heads up for our next sector streams webinar will be on the 8th of July, Wednesday at noon as usual. We haven't confirmed a topic for that one yet, so we will let everyone know about that though, but the date will be the 8th of July. So finally, just to say thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much for all of you as participants. Thanks to Amber supporting us. I hope you found it another useful and informative session today. As per usual, this has been recorded and we'll put it up on the resource hub so you can go back to it and watch it again as something to go back to. As always, we also welcome your feedback and we'd be very happy to receive any suggestions for topics for future episodes. If you can send any of that to inquiries@CIEEM.net, that would be great. Thank you very much again. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Jason. Cheers now.